Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here at this session, which will be a debate among 4 authorized voices. And if you agree with me, I'm going to ask our panel today to start by introducing themselves. It would be absurd that I do it because I just met them, I have to say. So I would ask, starting with Mart, to each of them to introduce you very briefly to the audience.
Yes. I'm Mart. I'm 25 years old. I'm now a junior counselor. Can you hear me? Put it closer. Yeah, I already pushed the button. But I have always problems with my voice. It's not that I'm shouting a lot, but I just have some of my vocal cords are not that okay. But I will introduce myself. I'm 25 years old. I'm now junior counselor of the Dutch Council for Environment and Infrastructure, the Living Environment and Infrastructure. Next to that, I was the chair of the Student Network for Sustainability 2 years ago, and I'm now doing my thesis on guided social technical evolution, dus evolution in social, in complex adaptive systems.
And you live in Amsterdam?
I live in Leiden.
In Leiden, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Martí.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Martí Oliveras from La Garriga, little town situated close to a beautiful natural park we have here in Catalonia. It's Montseny, and I'm studying here at the University of Barcelona. I just finished geography, and now I'm currently doing the Master of Communication and Applied Climatology. First of all, it's a pleasure to stay today here, and especially thanks for Arnau to give me this big opportunity. And sorry for my English because I was living in Ireland some months ago, but since I'm here again, it's a shit thing because in this aspect, my English, I couldn't improve it as I did it there, no? So thanks and good afternoon.
Thank you, Martí. Your English seems to be good enough for us to understand what you say. Okay, Brenda, please.
Hello, my name is Brenda King, and Marty, shit thing, the Irish will be very proud. With that term, very proud indeed. I'm a member of the European Economic and Social Committee, and I chair the Sustainable Development Observatory. And when I was looking at everyone's profile, I saw that I forgot to say that I did my first degree in Statistics and Economics from University College London, and I did a master's in something called Management Science and Operation Research at Warwick University. So if I say something dumb, you won't think, oh, she's stupid. There may be some smart, but some stupid, given the presentation that we heard earlier. I'm from the UK, you may have guessed.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Carl, please.
Well, I'm up here for the second time. I'm still Carl Falkenberg. I still have all the things that I have done in my past. I'm, for the moment, as a senior fellow in Oxford. I have just had the pleasure of writing a report on a more sustainable Europe for President Juncker. And I guess that's the reason why I have been invited to participate here.
That's a guess. Maybe there are other reasons. Okay, very well. So we have more or less 1 hour. The way this is going to work is I'm going to ask our guests here to give a very, very short personal view on the main challenges of the issue we are going to discuss, which, as you perfectly know, is the 2030 agenda, 3-4 minutes each. From there, we will have a few questions here at the table. And immediately after, I'll ask the audience to start asking questions to the panel, if you agree with that system. Carl, why don't you start telling us which are, in your views, the 2, 3, 4 main challenges we have to overcome in the next 5 years?
Thank God we were warned a little bit about these 3 questions, so I did give it some thought. Does this? Yeah, can you hear me? My 3 points are governance, measuring, and politics. And it's these 3 because I think that with the SDGs, we have developed the substance. We know where we want to go in the perspective of 2030. So I think what matters now is no longer to go over the science and the justification and rehearsing all this, but is to focus on how do we actually get there. And the how actually we get there is, in the first place, is the governance. We need to take holistic approaches. We have to be transparent and participatory about it. We have to get out of our respective silos. The second issue is we need to measure the effects of our policies. We have to have a baseline, and then we have to see policies that we decide, are they taking us in an improving or in a worsening situation. That means measuring, that means developing indicators that are appropriate for the targets that we want to reach. And the third point is a very fundamental politics point. Decisions for societies are going to be influenced very largely by politics. We have, for the moment, a lot of policies in place that are taking us away from sustainability. So we must change course, and that in our democratic systems means we have to get involved with party politics, with elections, and with influencing governance. We obviously have also culture change and root activities, finding good examples, but I remain a government junkie. Societies have to collectively, democratically decide where they want to go, and sustainability requires change in policy. Therefore, it's essentially going to be a political process.
Thank you, Carl. That was perfect, especially in terms of time. Let's get his frame. I have many questions after your intervention. I noted 4 questions. Brenda, try to be in that 4 minutes frame. You guys do the same. Then we'll ask questions, and then we'll introduce the second matter.
Oh, okay. The main challenges, and I think I want to congratulate you for the very successful conference, because it gave us a lot of food for thought, especially
He's the one to be congratulated.
Yes, thank you. No, especially this morning when we were talking in very much about the importance of resilience and how key, how do we make Europe more resilient. We have a framework, the 2030 Agenda, which gives us a path, which we think, to a successful model to manage this resilience. But as Carl said, how do we get there? And most importantly, how do we get buy-in from people who are feeling left behind? So how do we get that message across that this model can make them, can bring about well-being and make them feel more prosperous, and how do we go about communicating that in the current climate that we have? And I think so. The communication is very, very key, and getting buy-in is very key, because as Carl said, we are in a democracy, so we have to find a way to bring people on side. And what makes it complex, the 2030 Agenda, the reason why we like it is because it's integrated. But because it's integrated, it makes it very difficult to communicate. So I think that is one of the main challenges, in addition to what Carl has said, because he has said very eloquently what the other challenge is that, of course, to bring us about, we need politicians to help us bring this about. But the way our world is now, with social media, with media in general, there's a very short-term focus. And with these goals, you have to start now, but the actual results or the benefits may not come within the election cycle.
Very well. You're even better than Carl. Martí, your turn.
Well, in my opinion, I think the most important goal issue is climatic change, with any doubt. It's obviously that in recent years, the global warming caused, it's probably as a natural cycle tendency, that it has been increased and has some more efforts and problematics now in the present because of human activity. So I think we have to work on that. Probably the best way could be working and sharing this information, this reality that we live every day here, especially in these metropolitan areas. And so university, high school, since the childs are like 3, 4, the age that they have in mind, the capacity to improve and to learn all these concepts should be maybe one way to try to start changing this issue. Secondly, the security food, I would like to refer to this one because as a consequence of this climatic change, we have pollution caused by human effect, but not only in terms of climate. So apart from this climate change, we have consequences on food and persons we need to survive, drinking and eating. So if we have to take care on this also. And finally, sustainable development, probably this idea, the last one involves the previous one. The necessity, as I said before, to arrive to all people since we are childs, and like Mart and I in university and studying. So doing and taking care and keeping in mind the sustainable development, we can start changing this world.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Martí. Mart? Yes. You guys are not related, Martí, no?
No. Now we are. I connect very quickly. Okay. The 3 things I think are most important, also ranked. Yeah, it's hard to rank, but I just did. The first thing is we got really a problem with our information infrastructure. We got the asphalt. There's a lot of information, but there's nearly any navigation and there are nearly any rules. So for us, it's maybe a bit more easy to navigate in our information society, but our network is filtering most of the information you get from friends, and they already do the filtering. But many people I know are just get nonsense all day long, and they change their mind and imagination goes on, and they live in a totally different world because of the information they get. I think that is a point where we should work on.
Can you elaborate a little bit more? What do you mean by that? When you say you mean we have different sources of information?
When you, for example, your Facebook timeline, many people get their information by Facebook, even if they get articles from good journals or newspapers. They only select a type of newspapers from the articles that the Facebook algorithm thinks is the best for them. Selected by their friends, selected by the algorithm. There's no thinking behind it, and it really takes a lot of costs and expertise to get out of your information bubble. I get totally different timeline than other friends who are more right-wing or more left-wing or whatever. So we get different news, so also different opinions about the thoughts. Especially the information speciation of the Republicans and Democrats. They live in a totally different world. And it's also happening in our society, I think, the dissemination of all different worldviews. So I think the information infrastructure, especially now, information has to be cheap most of the time. The ones who are guarding the information were the journalists, but the journalists just have to run every day and just publish all the time and publish for reading and not publish for the truth. So it's a difficult thing.
And on top, they don't get paid.
Yeah, you need to get paid. And we can manage, for example, I think as intellectuals, that you create groups who do good research and we read it, but it's not for everyone that you get the right information. So that's one major problem, I think. The other one, and I'll do it a bit shorter to keep in time, is, I think we need to increase the system thinking, each other's understanding. If you stay in your silo, you have an imagination of the other silos. And imagination is really powerful to create things, but also a tool which can also create a different worldview. For example, I got friends who think that all CEOs sit together to destroy the world. Some of them think. Other friends think that, the government knows everything, has infinite resources, and of course that's also not true. So there are different worldviews because of the imagination of each other's silos. It happens between all different disciplines too, about economics, what they think of anthropologists and whatever. The last thing is, it's already said in the sustainability now, I read it by the Commission, is be big and ambition on big things and be small on the small things. And everything which can be managed locally, please do it locally. Because when you have to communicate to Mars, for example, it takes 20 minutes. What do the IT people do? They let them think themselves. Let the Mars, I say it, let the satellite move itself, be a little bit intelligent itself. But even on Earth, it takes much longer to implement law. It's like changing from distance something which can take years. So it's steering with a timeline of years. So the closer you get to the problem, the better you will solve it. So as much as responsibility as close to the problem is my last thing.
Very well. Well, we've heard, I have here a list of 10 challenges, but let me ask you all together, and please just raise your hand if you want to answer, about the challenges that were not mentioned. I don't know if it's not a challenge or the word economy didn't came up. Is there an economic variable that becomes a challenge also, or you think this will be easily solved in terms of economy? I was a bit amazed that no one talked about limited economical resources and how we are going to solve that. Carl, please.
I didn't select economy because the whole thing is economic. I mean, we're talking about sustainable solutions. Sustainable solutions have to take the economic, the social, and the environmental elements into account and balance them. So that's why I didn't mention them. I don't believe that economy is important in the sense of we don't have the means to become sustainable.
You don't think that will be a problem?
I don't think that that's a problem.
And can you elaborate a bit more? Why do you think that's not a problem?
Because I think that we can produce, consume, and have well-being, as Brenda was saying, in sustainable ways, as cost-efficient as the damaging production form that we are indulging in for the moment. We've heard a lot about agriculture in the earlier session here. We are thinking today that in order to produce more and more efficiently, we need to invest in pesticides, fertilizers, and high tech. We have now evidenced, large size evidence, even companies, Barilla, to name one, is producing durum wheat by using less fertilizer, less pesticide, traditional form of rotating crops. And the outcome is that not all the pests are killed, and that some of the insects are adding to the wind pollination, and they're turning out higher yields by doing a different, more traditional agricultural production. So it's not right to say that if we want to look into the social and the environmental consequences of our actions, these are brakes on our economic success. the opposite is true. We simply need to get that out and get it better understood.
Very well. Could you advocate for the opposite thought? Could you think or state about an economy, a European economy, being boosted by the European Union and all the territories that conforms playing in favor of this 2030 agenda?
Yes, I very much hope so. If the bottom line narrative of my report is that Europe was a lighthouse for Europeans and many outside Europe. We represented a third way, a more humane, a more democratic, a more law-based development than on the one side the Soviet Union communist system, and on the other side the US capitalist system. We have lost our third way somewhere around the turn of the last century, and our own people are beginning to turn the back on Europe because they no longer believe that their economic being is going to be helped by Europe. I do believe that in Europe there is a fundamental willingness to take on sustainability as a common objective towards which we can federate Europe and move in that direction. But it does change, it does require change, and implementing change, we heard this today also, is something that all systems tend to resist. So it is going to be hard labor. But there is a big promise if we actually go down that route.
Do you all agree with, and just don't say yes, try to do you all agree with Carl's views in terms of how this, pursuing these goals will accordingly dance in harmonic terms with our different economies? Do you think it will be a positive and harmonic dance, or you think we'll see some economical disruptions here?
I mostly agree. But no, yeah, what you see with a lot of cities, also in Delft, in Leiden, Haarlem, 3 different, nearly equal cities, they all connect with the identity of sustainability, wanting to be sustainable, which really works internally for the cities to function, and they all want to be more sustainable than the others and think they are the most sustainable city. So it will really help for Europe to do so, but we're not alone as Europe, we're with different continents, and I think it will help. So it will benefit when we all think we go for sustainability, we are going to be the most sustainable, and I think the competition between continents will still be there, that Africa wants to be the most sustainable, or China, or the USA. That will be really good, but it's also a bit weird that we only should be the most sustainable, but because we need each other. So I think it works, but it's also a bit weird. Because, you need to do it together, so and an identity is quite personal. So we all should go to be more sustainable.
Last question on economy. Do you think the business community around Europe is both willing and betting on this path?
The business community is split, I would think. I think that there are very forward-looking parts of business, and business in terms of industry, services, and agriculture across the board of the activities. But as always in a society, we also have those that are defensively sticking to the ways in which they have made their investment in the past. When I said that we can move forward, it didn't mean that there wouldn't be any eggs broken. When we moved into cars and out of horse carts, the people who were building horse carts were unhappy. In the same way, if we move forward to sustainable activity, those people that are producing milk with 2,000 cows and a computer will probably not be very happy, because this is not going to be the way in which a sustainable production line will look. So it does require change, and change will mean that some activities will have to stop, will have to fundamentally change. So don't get me wrong, when I say that we have the economic means, it doesn't mean that we have not to stop doing individual activities, and that there will be winners and losers. I think on balance, moving in that direction will create more winners than losers. And I think we can handle this process in a way that, that is going to be socially acceptable, which is, I think, one of the things we need to take into account. I'm not preaching revolution, I'm preaching evolution.
That was very clear, Carl. Thank you very much. Brenda, you mentioned those segments of our population that feel left behind. Can you elaborate that concept a bit more? Who are you referring you with that concept, and how can we deal with that?
Thank you very much. Within the committee, the other area I have been involved in is something called the EU's relationship with the African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. And the reason why I raise this, because when people talk about the Millennium Development Goals, they talk about having lifted many people out of poverty. And this is true, you know, especially in parts of Asia. I'm thinking India and China. So what has happened in terms of those countries is that the inequality with those countries and Europe has reduced. But to use Carl's term, the losers are those people who lost their jobs because manufacturing and services shifted to places, you know, like Africa, India, China. And so this is why I say it's a big challenge, because going forward with this particular agenda, there are going to be losers. But in the past, Europe had, probably didn't anticipate it, but they hadn't put anything in place to help those who have been left behind to transition in this new world. So we celebrate the fact that there's less poverty in the world in general, but one of the fallouts is that we have people within Europe, as was said earlier by Dr. Wilkinson, who are less prosperous than they were when compared to 1985. So I think if we are going, that's why I say it's very important. The big challenge is to get people on board who know they've already lost and know that they're likely to be losers with this transition. So what we need to do is, one, to admit that that is the case. There are going to be winners and losers, but it's very important that member states, Europe, have something in place to demonstrate that, one, they know this is going to happen, and two, they have a plan to help those transition into this new, resilient Europe.
Thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about losers and winners. And I'm going to ask all of you, but let me start with the left side of the table, my left side of the table. Marty, who do you think are the main losers here and the main winners, if you can give us some light there?
Yeah. We know that with this sustainable development, probably more rich people, this business that Carl commented before, has the majority capacity to improve and to win more and more and more. This is the opposite point of people who try to improve this model of life that it's not working now, and especially in these metropolitan areas. We know that in some cities here in Europe are more improved than here, for example in Catalonia, that in this aspect probably we are working on doing like this annual conference. It's a good way to learn, to share. And I think we need to change our mentality through these people that are growing up, and that maybe firstly they think, okay, we are going to lose. It's impossible, not impossible, but it's difficult to change it now because we are used to live in this way, and it's really difficult to. And I'm emphasize again on childs because it's reality. They are our future, and they need to change. They think maybe, okay, it's difficult to earn, to enjoy the life, because we born with this theoretical type of life, no? But if we change as a practical way, with these more rural areas inside the city, could be a good way, and also earn, so not lose or win. And definitely we have to put in the same level, no, the winners and the losers.
Mart, you mentioned before your belief in local power. You said something like in the line of, if you can do it locally, don't do it at a higher level. I think we can all understand that, but how will that cope with a European Union that is organized in strong states? Is there a contradiction there, or you think there is no contradiction there?
No, I think there's enough to do, luckily. So manage as much as possible locally. What's not possible to manage locally because of the economic market or whatever rules, just try to manage first with the member state itself, and then, or with the sector. And if that's not possible, filter only what really needs to be done, combined, do that with Europe.
Do you all agree with that vision? Carl, Brenda, do you all agree with that? I'm sure Carl has something to say here.
Then maybe I'm going to change a bit, and maybe you do agree.
Change it before people read.
It really, you have to give responsibility where it's possible. When you see that a government, a country does not do as much as they should do, then there needs to be some sort of external pressure or law or whatever to affect it.
Carl?
I have some difficulties with this idea of doing everything bottom up. I have lived Europe, and I know a little bit about the history of this continent. And the history of this continent has been over centuries to think, to be convinced that what you are doing yourself is right, and if it doesn't work, it's because your neighbor is doing wrong. And so you take a weapon and you get him out of the way. And we need to overcome this falling back into individual solutions that are not coordinated. I'm all for subsidiarity. I'm all for grassroots. But subsidiarity, I just was in Oxford 2 days ago, and I had a former British minister explaining that subsidiarity is the principle by which in Europe we let things happen locally. And I disagreed. Subsidiarity for me is a principle that only makes sense if you have collectively decided the direction, the goal, where do you want to go, and then you leave the means to work in that direction, and for that goal you can leave those means to be decided at local level, because it's not necessarily one identical measure that will take very different region to the same goal where we want to collectively come. So I think there is something, but it is not just independently going back to deciding in Leiden how I want to have my cars, how much CO2, how much nitrogen they can emit to protect my region. I have to have a collective objective for a sustainable Europe defined in a number of policies up to a certain degree. And then we need to make sure we need to find better ways to seeing how this can be translated into individual realities, into geographical realities, into cultural realities, into whatever the vast differences that we still have in Europe and that are a wealth and that we should defend. But I do think that the two levels, the common definition of the direction where Europeans want to go, and then the decision about what are the individual means that help us get in that direction, that the two sides have to come together, and I cannot say it has to be either top-down or bottom-up. We need to do it in parallel.
So it would be something like collective initiatives, local implementation. Is that something that you would be in agreement with?
I think we can. One of the examples that we talked about this morning was water. I think water policy is a good example. What we are saying at European level is that we have to have policies that make sure that we are not taking more water than our systems can reproduce.
Right.
So Europe decided all member states have to have water accounts where they calculate for every river basin system how much water does it generate, what is abstracted for urban, for agriculture, for industry, what do we need for recreational needs, what do we need for transport, etc. Create an account. We're not saying to every region, you should price water at X. That can be done locally, but it has to be in the same principle of not abstracting more water than within the system can be regenerated. And that makes sense, and to enforce it is a step forward. And this sounds very simple, but is not the reality in Europe today. And it has been the most difficult of all member states here in Spain. I had to threaten Spain with Court of Justice as DG Environment to finally overcome the infighting between the different regions of Spain, that all were saying, there's enough water in Spain if only my neighbor region does not abstract so much. That's where we end up if we do things locally.
Yeah,
so we need to collectively look at it and set the principles.
You have all our solidarity, but I mean, this, I don't know how your patience brought you all the way down, because I mean, in Spain we have had 4 civil wars in the last 200 years, and one war against a foreign enemy. That's since Napoleon. The last foreign enemy we had was Napoleon. And then, since then, because the national sport is to fight against each other, we have had 4 civil wars. So, congratulations for trying to cope with it. Now, moving into politics a little bit, which seems to be, I mean, the entire panel seems to be in agreement that politics is a huge challenge there. You mentioned different aspects of the world. Let me start by asking you: do you think there is a north-south issue among European countries here? Do you think that South will see things differently than the North, and this can produce a clash like we have seen in other issues, or you think there will be more harmony between North and South here? Do you want to? I mean, we see it today. I read a lot of consumer polls and so on, and when you compare what a Scandinavian thinks about sustainability and you compare it with a Greek citizen or with a Portuguese or with a Spanish citizen, it's like being in 2 different planets. Do you think this will be harmonized in a way in the next few years, or you think we'll still have these different points of views that seem to be difficult to reconcile?
Yeah, politics difficult. Now, what what happens between the different villages, you are using too much water and I don't, happens the same between the member states and between the north and the south. If you can blame something, it happens a lot, especially because the mechanism behind politics is not doing the things that you all together want. It's about division. My worldview is the best worldview, vote for me. You are crazy, you are bad, and especially now, when you look, for example, in the extreme version, I call it democracy, to Hillary and Trump, it's all about you are totally wrong and I am totally right, and more even, it's you are totally wrong. So I think maybe we can set the next step in our way of communication. It's also the form of the information structure. We have to get out of the minds of all the Europeans, young and old, what do they want? We can do it queries or whatever, or people say, okay, we got this amount of money, where would you like to spend it on? Just to get next to politics, also a few what people want. Now, some politicians claim that they know what the people want. They cannot talk to everyone, nobody knows.
Is this the reason why things like what Carl was saying at the very beginning, the fact that we still have policies in place that actually walk away from the idea of sustainable development? Do you think that's the reason why we still have those policies?
I think yes. I think you should be selected on a place because you do the job very well. You bring Europe forward or the world forward. So the selection should be on capacities and not of telling the truth and telling your truth that people want to hear. So there should be another mechanism to get the information of the people out of their mind. What kind of world would they like to live in?
Yeah, but let me land this problem to the bottom. I'm sorry to say, but we have a prime minister here who doesn't believe in climate change, to start with, okay? I'm not going to say whether this is good or bad. It's a fact, okay? It's a fact. Of course, everybody has his opinions. It's still a free country. But we have that fact. Probably he would lose any election in Northern Europe with that simple sentence. Here he wins the election. How are we going to cope with that? Do you understand what I mean? How are you going to cope with this?
I would like to disappoint you a little bit.
I am only asking. I'm not being disappointing.
No. But I also have been disappointed. That's why I use this term. I thought what you said, that in Europe, climate change denying is no longer a majority position.
In Northern Europe?
In Europe altogether.
Well, Spain is still Europe. Yeah?
In Spain, you have a prime minister who is in denial. In France, we have a president candidate who is denying now. He's discovered denial. And he must be thinking that having discovered denial is a good way of being elected. So somehow he must have a view of France in majority still voting on a denial approach, which to me is an enormous disappointment. I thought we were smarter. I think the bottom line of it, however, is that people are not voting on those issues. I don't think that Rajoy has been elected or will ever be elected because he doesn't believe in climate change. And what I'm trying to preach is that we as individuals, we as the electorate, we have a responsibility to put our crosses behind names that tell us the right answers on our priorities. And if someone is putting a cross behind Sarko, to name him, he has his priorities wrong. And then he should not blame the system or whatever that politics has gone wrong, but we just have not done our very simple basic duty. Either we say that climate change, as Marty was saying, is the most important challenge. It can be discussed, but if we think that that is the most important challenge, then it should be impossible to not vote or to vote for a candidate who says climate change has nothing to do with human activity. And we don't connect those threads. We're still voting for someone because we liked the line that he said one day, or because he shook our hands, or because I know a friend of a friend of a friend who is in class with his son, or God knows how we vote. Sometimes I really wonder on what basis we do vote. I also begin more and more to wonder how we govern. My concept of government was a responsible, informed individual who is making us a proposal of how society should evolve, and putting that to a vote. And then either he gets a majority of people saying, this is the direction I want to go, and therefore I vote for you. Nowadays, governments, before they take position, wait for an opinion poll.
Yeah.
So governments are no longer leading, but governments are following. And then I get very, very nervous because it's the blind leading the blind, or following the blind, or whatever. And you have every explanation of why we are in the mess that we are in.
Okay, we have 20 minutes left, so I will ask, I will ask the audience to start thinking about questions. Let me raise the last question from the table, unless you don't have any. On what you just said, Carl, and this goes first to Martí. Martí said climate change is the first challenge. Would you all agree with that?
I have a difficulty in just pointing at one. I think for me the priority would be sustainable societies. Climate change is one of the elements, but we can also fall into a climate change silo and try to address climate change and creating problems to our ambient air, as I have said this morning, or create problems in other areas, do social injustices. It doesn't help us if we go in and say biodiversity is the most important, and I now want to create protected areas without any regard to social incomes and social economic activity within certain regions. It's a balanced approach that we need. We need to start really going for holistic, sustainable solutions, and that means at least these three. And I think more and more often I also mention culture to it, because when we talk about well-being, we are not satisfied simply with financial or economic well-being. We also want to be taken into account our cultural expectation, our cultural lives. So it's probably those four elements that I would say should be the guidelines for any policy and for addressing any of the issues that are out there and that we need to address. And
what you propose that the management of those four elements is integrated, as Brendan and yourself were saying a few minutes ago, as a system. Yeah. Because when Martí said climate change, he immediately after said food security, which is related actually. No? So what do you think, Martí?
No, yeah. Well, let me add before on this, because I mean climate change in terms of probably what people in general have in mind, like the most problem that people not that not works or that not read or that not study on, maybe thought, okay, the first problem is every problem we have in terms of ecology, in terms of nature, it's related to climate change. And I want to emphasize as a geographer that probably we are living a high temperature cycle tendency that obviously is increased by human activity. But then in terms of food security, I don't know a lot about this, but I think, yeah, as Ferran said, is in relation, and we have to involve in to have in mind the both aspects to learn and to improve it more.
There was a very interesting article in a Catalan magazine a couple of years ago. They were interviewing this farmer, actually where you come from, in Montseny, which is this national park here, and he was a pretty old man. He was in his mid-80s, and he was saying that when he was young, he collected 40 different species of apples in that national park. Now there's 3. Now there's 3. So in 37 species of apples have totally disappeared from what he had in his ecosystem in only 30 years, and that's obviously climate change. Okay, audience, time to work a little bit. Any, please. Can you just very briefly say your name? There's another mic. There's another mic.
Yeah, Joaquim Coromines. A question about how you expect that large companies would react to from now. And by large companies, I mean conventional power plants, car factories, and so on. And also the universities. You have mentioned that universities are too much behind, and what we expect, that they will remain behind or they will change, and how you see that they will change.
Gracias, señor Coromines. Who wants to take both questions, or at least one and then the other? Carl?
Well, I think that we are on a movement already. Europe is exporting more environmentally friendly, environmentally produced goods than other goods. We are exporting more green goods than cars. When I said this 3 years ago for the first time to a journalist, she nearly fell off her chair. I said, can you produce those figures for me? Because it was a sensational news for her, because everyone is still basically feeling that the green economy is a kind of niche economy that Europe has the luxury to afford, but no one else is interested in. The rest of the world is dramatically interested in European environmental technology. As a Director General for Environment, I had every week Chinese delegations knocking on our door to finding out how does Europe regulate economic activity so that people can still go out in the streets and breathe the air. How do you go about making sure that your river water is drinkable? How do you make sure that your land, your soil, is in a situation that is still producing healthy food and is not polluted as it is in our territory? So it's not as if this is a luxury problem that only the rich part of Europe is interested in, but it is an element of our international competitiveness already. So we are moving there, but we still have a lot of past industrial investments, and those people find it interesting to continue to amortize their investment. So as long as we allow them to continue to produce energy in polluting ways, and as societies we don't tell them basta, we know how to do it in clean ways, and we want you to stop your polluting way and invest in something positive, they will continue doing it, because it's the selfish, normal, unfortunate human behavior. I want my dirty machine to continue producing money for me, as long as someone tells me, stop it, because you're producing a collective bad. So I think we can do it. Now on the universities, I meet a lot of universities where integrated curricula are being developed. Perhaps I'm in the wrong universities. I heard this morning that university is just in front of religion in terms of resistance to change. I have been in a lot of universities where people are beginning to offer integrated courses where we're no longer simply producing a lawyer, an economist, a chemist, or what have you, but where they actually begin to move across the board and have a little bit of everything. And I think that gives me hope that we will have people who will understand more. I'm very nervous when I recruit or when I participate in selection committees for high officials in the Commission dealing with economic policies, and I ask them, what would you recommend in terms of taking resource efficiency policies into account? And they look at me and they say, what is resource efficiency? That's the kind of reality we still have today. We come through we have come through education streams that have focused on us on how does the financial world function, how does the economy function, how does law go, how does chemistry function, but we haven't brought these together. And I see that in university curricula are now offered where you can bring these together. And I hope that that's going to produce better understanding and better knowledge for better policy making.
Any further comments to that? Yes, please, Mart.
I can underline this partly again. As my role for Students for Tomorrow, we were for integrating sustainability in higher education in the Netherlands. And what you see now and 5 years ago is that it's a lot more about interdisciplinary research and about sustainability. For example, it's also European. It's called Green Office Movement. Maybe you're aware of it. But a Green Office is a place where students and employees work together on sustainability issues for the university, on research, education, and their practices, but also for the region. And 6 years ago, there was only one. And now there are 25 spread across Europe, in the UK, in Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands. So it goes very quickly. And I expect in, I think, 5 years that it at least doubled, even more. So I think there's a strong movement in universities for sustainability, but you can see a strong movement, but still it's a small percentage of the total. Sometimes you see a lot of movement, but you cannot see you cannot see the total. So it's 5-6% of all education is maybe sustainability and integrated, but the rest is not.
Thank you, Brenda. Let's pass to a second question. I think you had one question over there, Fina. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm Fina Badle from the Advisory Council of SD from Catalonia. I'm just missing very much, all these people left behind. It's very, Ms. Brenda, say, yeah, we have to really, then all the state members have a plan for the people who will be left behind. But what we do with the people from the south that we have left behind? Just 3 years ago, we had 50% of our younger people, unemployed. 50%. Now, we are very lucky. Now we are just 40. We have over 20% of the population poor, with all these European indicators, and all these things, they don't leave they don't have a job, they cannot leave the house, they don't have children, it's a vicious cycle, and this, we have it now. They already left behind, not the ones that they will do, the ones that they're already there. What do we do with this? Thank you.
You want to take that one, Brenda? Or
That is the very, very difficult, that is the difficult question. And this is something that I think we have to acknowledge and something must be done. This is why I was saying that if nothing is done, it's going to be very difficult to sell this 2030 agenda, if you even look at the transition to a low carbon economy. People who work in high carbon areas are going to be extremely resistant. So I don't pretend to have the answer, but something must be done. And I wonder sometimes, and I don't know, if education and skills have something to do with it. Now, I know a lot of our young people are very well educated, but sometimes they are, I'll give an example. I got an honorary degree a couple in 2009 from a university, and it was being done with the engineering department. And I went in there thinking to myself, I'm going to count how many females are graduating because I know, you know. But I got there, it's in the UK, and I was shocked that I saw hardly any Europeans graduating in this. It was Chinese, Indian, and Nigerians. There were so few UK citizens, young people, or European young people. I mean, I was really and truly shocked because, I mean, I'm out of the education system. I don't know what. And I run a small organization and in the UK, and you know, when young people do their masters, they have to get some work experience. And I needed someone because we were bringing in a new IT system. So I wanted someone to help me to oversee that, working with the IT company. So I said to Warwick, where I went to university there, that, you know, I'd be happy to take on a couple of students to do this. And the 6 students that they presented to me were all Indian students from India. So I said to the university, oh, well, I'm surprised that they're all 6. And they said, well, you said that you wanted the best students. So then I said, okay, I'll take one of the best, interview and take one of them, but I would like a British student. So I have 50-50. So, I mean, that's just one small example, but given that we say that there's such a shortage of engineers in Europe, I went to an event in what is called Silicon Fen in Cambridge, and they were saying their need for engineers are so great that they can employ every engineer that is graduating across EU member states. You know, such is their need for engineers. Now, we're not all, I mean, we're not all capable to be engineers, but there's clearly a gap between what is needed and what is being, you know, and what is being learned. And when we talk about engineers, we're not just talking about universities, but those coming through the vocational routes as well. So I don't know what the answer is, but there seems to be a mismatch within our economies and societies.
I think we'll all agree with that gap. However, that gap will not solve this issue because we're talking about the present, and the educational gap, which is clearly one of the main issues to be solved, will take some time until it's filled up. However, I think we have to, unless you want to make a quick comment, we have 3 more questions to go and 5 minutes.
I would want to make a comment because I think it is important even to understand the past to do the full story. Spain and Portugal joined the European Union and enjoyed a period of substantive growth and increase in well-being. And that was never really attributed to Europe, but it was probably attributed to individual Spanish or Portuguese governments. Then the period overheated, and now the negative consequence that has started is attributed to Europe and no longer to the Spanish or Portuguese governance. So I think it is important that we are clear about this, and the fact that these situations have come up are just evidence of what I have been saying all along today. Our policies for the moment are not sustainable. We have to change our policies. The present crisis, the present situation here in this country, but in other countries, in the South in particular, are due to a completely misfunctioning financial international system. Let's not forget the crisis that we are living here for the moment started in New York.
Yeah.
Started with something that used to be called Lehman Brothers. But because we had opened the financial systems and therefore bad financial products were spread to banks everywhere, our prudential systems were not ripe in Europe to control this properly. We have been caught, and a number of southern European countries have been caught on the wrong foot because they were over-investing and therefore taking on debt, public debt, because they had a catching up to do to get to the level of the rest of Europe. And in that crucial moment, an international financial crisis, a bubble exploded and got us wrong-footed. What we should have, from my perspective, done is to stay solidaire and help each other in Europe. And what has happened is that we have all gone for our local solution. Germans saying, well, if these Spaniards and these Greeks cannot work properly and earn a living, I'm not going to pay for them. Solidarity broke down, austerity has come in, and has made the situation worse everywhere. So it's a simple example of bad policy, of unsustainable policy that has produced bad outcomes. We should learn from there. We should make sure that speculative investment is much better controlled, that we therefore can have an economic development that is growing, that is increasing the wealth, and is not going in these roller coaster terms, high growth and then a big crash, and then the next high growth and the next big crash, which is what we see for the moment and what people suffer from.
Thank you,
So
Carl.
we need to do these things.
I am going to ask, I mean, we have 3 questions and really we're out of time. I would ask the people formulating the questions to be very, very telegraphic and also the answers being telegraphic so we can cover all issues. I will try to comment on that. So it's 4 questions now, 5 questions. Okay. The first one is Arnau, here, our director. And then it's Mr. Kenty Richardson in the back, and then our friend here, and then the last 2, one in the back, and the lady here, and this lady in green. Okay, by this order.
This is a question for the youngest part of the panel. The idea is technology. I'm quite worried about technology. I mean, an increasing part of society is confused. I think they are looking at technology not as a tool, but as an objective. We have this fantastic, we are plenty of young people enthusiastic about the idea of these glasses that isolate you from the world. You can be here listening to Brenda and to Carl Frankenberg, but you can see, you can feel that you are in the jungle. I mean, so you are isolating yourself. We have in the super communication era, we have the more isolated society. Okay. People don't look at your eyes when you meet with them. So this, in some years, we will have this this new human people, which will be technologically improved, and it's not a joke. And we are talking about the idea of living in Mars. So I don't know how many years ago from now, but it's an idea. And there are some international agencies and firms which are putting some money just with this idea that, okay, when you have these boundaries that we were talked before, but if we overcome these boundaries, we have also a plan B, which is Mars. Are you worried about this? You are a technological advanced people.
Yeah, we know that probably as Mart and me, we grow up with this type of life. Technology is a reality with us. But let me see a little difference, because I feel different from the generations that are now growing up, because I'm 22. I was born in 1994, and I think in these 22 years old, the thing changed a lot. And I remember, for example, playing and growing up in a more rural or more traditional environment, and not as now that people, like, for example, my little cousins or childs in school, you can see now with mobiles, and they think, okay, it's the best way, all is positive, and we forget that the reality is not finished on this. And it's in this aspect we must change this tendency that is absolutely unhealthy to build, to prosper in these things.
Mart, would you like to add very shortly? Thank you.
Now, yeah, it's always double. Of course, without the technology, you wouldn't all hear me now, and I wouldn't be here without the airplane. And before this morning when it started, I put it on Facebook, the questions which we were asked, and 30 people reacted, and I took it for this discussion now very quickly. So it can be helpful for discussions and to connect. But also it has their backdrops, of course. Everything can be positively used and negatively used. So it's continuous discussion about what the effects are.
Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Kent Richardson from the Regional Environmental Center. I represent an international organization that has been working in the last 25 years, a transition from central economy to open market economy. And this was a great transition that we had in Eastern Europe, but it's probably not completely achieved because there were and there are still some challenges on governance. And my question is a little bit fundamental and a little bit provocative, but somehow the success story of the EU has been the common market. And we can also say that to a certain extent, the environmental acquis, it's also a success story, because we had probably an incredible amount of legislation that has been able to combine productivity, but also environmental quality. But if we agree, at least here today, and with this audience, that our main priority is the 2030 agenda, and this is really the main priority, one of the main challenges, I'm convinced that, of course, the countries have the main role there to implement the 2013 agenda. But then it's clear that there is a role for Europe. I'm convinced that there is a role for Europe. But don't you think that one of the main challenges is Europe in the last years has gone from a political project to mainly an economic project? And therefore, Europe lacks political leadership and political vision, political Europe, and also lack social Europe. That's why, and as we have seen today in the figures brought by the Joint Research Center, that the inequalities in Europe have not really improved. So we have still more poor and more rich and more differences. We still have not a proper political Europe, but national countries that tend to react. Therefore, the big challenge is how we can have an agenda for Europe, that it's a 2013 agenda done by the European institutions, promoted by European institutions, that have somehow lack the capacity to work on the political, on the social, and on the cultural dimension, and that have mostly power on environment and markets. Thank you.
Who wants to take it? And please be brief, because otherwise we won't be able to.
Isn't market economic? I mean, you say mostly market, but you say not enough. So I'm not sure that I follow you. I mean, the European Union started as a purely economic entity. I still remember the first name, the European Economic Community. And we are now the European Union. We have added policies almost on a daily basis. And mostly we are being criticized for having gone too much in politics. And people are beginning to say, you're doing too much, you're entering too many areas. So I don't think that I share your assessment. I think we still will have to grow politically. I think we are an economic giant on this planet, and we are a political dwarf. And we need to do something about this, but that would mean more working together and not less working together. And whether that's very popular today is a big question mark.
Thank you very much, Carl. Our friend here now. Just briefly introduce yourself with your name.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Digu Aruchami. I'm a researcher at the Autonomous University in Barcelona. Just following up on the question, I think I find two big challenges for Europe for implementation of the sustainable development. One is the demographics of Europe in terms of the aging population and the stress, and like in terms of the cultural and the economic impacts of that. And the other thing is also that I've been in Europe for 2 years. I'm from India. I'm not a software engineer, but I'm from India. So the last 2 years, the thing that I've seen when talking to friends here is that the trust that my friends, my age group have on democratic institutions or any institution in general is very low. Like they don't have that trust. So I think that's something that is something, how do you looking at building trust among young people or on institutions like the European Union or on the parliament or even their own governments, you know, how do you think that is a challenge, and how can you address that? Yeah.
Cool. Brenda, would you like to take one? Or would anyone on the table wants to? Thank you very much.
No, no problem. Thank you very much for that question. I guess, you know, coming from the UK, the Brexit vote is a very good example of the demographic change. We knew it is the older citizens and those who were left behind who were largely, you know, who were going to vote leave. And they actually came out and they voted. Young people who wanted to remain, for some reason, you know, they didn't vote, and as you said, and they are absolutely furious with, I guess, with the older generation for taking away their future. So, as you say, young people, they're so linked into technology and following things, but probably what you said, they're in their own. They follow their own silos of news that they want to do. But it is absolutely frustrating. But they are organizing now to do something. But the reason why a lot of them said they didn't vote is exactly what you said, that they have this lack of trust in the institutions. And they thought, you know, we're going to remain in the EU anyway, and my vote counts for nothing. And now they know that their vote does count, and how important it is. So I'm hoping that one of the silver linings of the Brexit is that young people will look on and will get more involved and vote for their interests. Because someone said earlier, politicians, you know, they go with the majority. I know that they don't. They go with those who will vote. And unfortunately, some of us in Europe had taken our ability to vote for granted. And I hope that this will not be, that will be the learning from what happened in the UK.
Thank you very much. There's a question here and then another in the back. There's one here in the middle, and one in the back, and then a lady here in the middle in green. The one in the back first, please.
Enric Paul, social psychologist and environmental psychologist from University of Barcelona. I would like to share the optimistic vision of Carl, but I'm afraid I can't. And I'm afraid that we are in a situation where the situation is a little dilemmatic between the institutional, focusing the responsibility on individuals on individual person, or focusing the responsibility in technology, technologies, or in technological aspects, or in political, economical aspects. And we can see that reflected in the treatment of the sustainable information that we can find on the press, for instance. And we have done some research on that, and it's quite clear. Then I'm afraid that as people that has been inside of the sustainability in the curricula at the universities, not only in University of Barcelona, in other universities, the results of this tendency, it's not so clear. Unfortunately, there are very few people very active, but the large number of managers of the universities are not interested on this subject. But if it's needed, we can take the flat of sustainability.
Thank you.
We have to be more autocritics. Probably you have autocriticism inside, but it's not public. But I'm afraid here we have a strong problem because, well, probably there are two realities, this official reality and another economic reality that go in another way.
I'm sorry, I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but we have to go to the question.
I finish.
Because we are clearly out of time.
I go through the new technologies. Then I would like to ask to Mart, that have made the mention of Facebook, etc. What kind of message over sustainability do you perceive that you receive through new technological instruments? Thank you. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Mark.
The last thing was, what kind of message would you say to the technological development for sustainability? Or I didn't.
If you have message about sustainability, there are messages pro sustainability, or it's not present there in this area.
In the technological area, nearly all technological universities in the Netherlands, there are 3, TU Delft, Eindhoven, and Twente, our sustainability is becoming a major part because companies are asking for it. So, yeah, sustainability.
We're going to close this session.
Okay, we will talk in 5 minutes and then I can go deeper into it.
Your Facebook
Yeah.
replies, you said that you tested friends. Did
Yeah.
you get replies on your Facebook?
Yeah, around 40 people reacted, and also a long story, so I cannot all summarize it. And we are just like old people, we do not agree on everything, so it's not one message, but many young people find this very important in my social bubble.
Thank you, Mark. Last question.
Thank you very much. I'm Vanessa Loriot from French Ministry of Environment. I just wanted to come back to the very quickly to the debate we had about priority to climate change, and to continue the discussion about our capacity to communicate with especially in France in this period of election with citizens about these issues. We noticed. For the moment, a challenge for us because during several years, especially with the period of Paris Agreement, we were a lot about climate change story, and now we have focused on climate change, and now we have to reinvent a story about global about a global approach, and what can be the link between a climate change story and a 2030 agenda, more global story.
Who wants to take that one? Carl?
If you look at the 2030 SDGs, climate change is in there. So it is part of it, and I think it can be relatively easily communicated, I think, that the triangle, economics, social, and environmental implications are visible on climate change, and that we need to define policies that with climate aspects, but with biodiversity aspects, with employment aspects, with all of the different areas that policy has to address, that we can focus and that we have a direction that the 2030 goals are setting us collectively at the global level. And we as Europeans have been fundamentally driving to make these goals universal goals, because we Europeans felt that it was important that we recognize that these goals are important for us, not only for developing countries around us, but we have to become sustainable. That's why we fought for having them as universal goals, and now we have to deliver and turn our unsustainable policies in a more sustainable direction.
Thank you very much, Carl. So I think this is the end of this debate. Just two very close notes, especially for those who come from outside Spain. We have always had a very, very high unemployment rate. Nobody talks about it, but just let me give you a few numbers. 1958, 13%. 1975, 10%. 1986, 22%. But take into account that until 1980, women didn't work at all in Spain. Women working in Spain were below 2%. So you have to double those figures. After 1980, 16%, 25% in the period 1999-94, 2001, 12%, which is our boom, and the boom after, 12% again, now 26%. So it's a structural problem that will be never solved with aspirins, as we are trying to do so now. Okay, that was a point especially for you foreigners. Thank you for this debate. It has been a privilege, and thank you for making it so fluent. Thank you.